Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're stepping into the dim, smoke-stained heart of a medieval castle, where stone walls trap heat, fires never truly go out, and the smell of yesterday's work still hangs in the air. You're not a noble or a knight, just a castle cook, moving quietly through a kitchen that never really sleeps. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You wake before the sound that tells everyone else to wake. It is not the bell that pulls you from sleep, nor the rising light of morning. It is the smell. Smoke, old and settled, clings to the air so thoroughly that even your dreams seem faintly charred. You inhale without thinking, and the breath tastes like yesterday's fire, yesterday's grease, yesterday's labour. It has soaked into the straw beneath you, into your hair, into the rough wool pulled around your shoulders. You could leave the castle tomorrow and still carry this scent with you for years. For now, it is simply the air you breathe. Your eyes open slowly, adjusting to the dimness of the servants' quarters. The light here is never fully dark, never fully bright. Somewhere nearby, embers still glow behind stone, stubbornly alive after the long night. Fires are never truly extinguished in a castle kitchen. They are banked, covered, coaxed into a waiting state, much like you, always expected to rise again. You lie still for a moment, listening. Stone shifts as the castle settles. A draught moves through narrow corridors, whispering through cracks that no one ever sealed properly. From far away, there is the soft shuffle of another servant rising early, careful not to wake the rest. Someone coughs, deep and practiced, the kind of cough that comes from years of smoke rather than sickness. A rat scratches behind a wall. It has learned the shape of this place better than most people ever will. Your body does not feel rested. It never truly does. Sleep here is not an escape, but a pause. A brief lowering of the burden before it is placed back on your shoulders. Your muscles ache in familiar ways. Shoulders stiff from stirring heavy pots. Hands sore from gripping knives and grinding grain. Legs heavy from standing too long on stone floors that never warm. None of this surprises you. Pain has become a background sensation, like the low hum of the fire itself. You sit up slowly, straw crackling beneath you. Fine dust drifts into the air, catching what little light there is. You brush it from your sleeves without much effect. Cleanliness is a relative idea here. You have learned not to chase it too fiercely. There are more important battles to lose. As you swing your feet down, they touch cold stone. The chill travels upward immediately, reminding you that warmth in this place belongs to the fires, not the people. You flex your toes, steady yourself, and stand. The room smells faintly of sweat, damp wool, and old food, but it is quieter here than it will be anywhere else today. This is the last calm you will have for many hours. You pull on your clothes, stiff with age and use. They are never fully clean, only less dirty than yesterday. The fabric carries traces of flour, grease and ash, layered so deeply that washing would do little good even if there were time or water to spare. You tighten the ties with practiced motions, fingers moving on their own, while your mind drifts somewhere slower. As you step into the corridor, the air changes slightly. Cooler, damper. Stone walls loom close, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of passing bodies. You know this path in darkness, know where the floor dips, where moisture gathers, where the walls weep faint trails of condensation. The castle is old, and it shows its age without embarrassment. Your steps are quiet, not because you fear waking anyone important, but because silence has become habit. Loudness belongs to the great hall, to the clang of armour and raised voices. Down here, among servants and stone, sound carries too far. It lingers. The closer you move toward the kitchen, the warmer the air becomes. The smell thickens. Smoke, fat, something sour that might once have been milk. It is a complicated scent, layered and persistent, and your body reacts to it automatically. Your stomach tightens, not from hunger exactly, but from anticipation. The day has begun whether you are ready or not. You reach the heavy wooden door and pause just briefly. Not out of reluctance, simply because this moment standing between rest and labour is the closest thing you have to choice. You place your hand on the worn handle. The wood is smooth from countless hands like yours, all belonging to people who rose too early and slept too late. People whose names are not remembered, but whose work fed those who are. The door opens with a low groan, and the kitchen greets you as it always does. It is larger than most rooms in the castle, though it feels smaller once it fills with people and heat and noise. Stone walls rise high overhead, blackened by years of smoke that no amount of scraping has ever fully removed. The hearth dominates the space, stretching wide enough to swallow entire trees once they are chopped down to size. A faint orange glow pulses within, patient and waiting. The floor is already slick in places, even at this hour. Grease does not respect schedules. Neither does decay. You step carefully, avoiding a spot where something spilled yesterday and was never fully cleaned. It does not matter much now. The day will add more layers soon enough. You move to the fire first, always the fire. It is the heart of everything here, demanding constant attention and offering little mercy in return. You kneel, coaxing it back to strength, feeding it wood, adjusting embers with tools worn thin from use. The heat blooms outward, pressing against your face and chest. It is comforting and punishing all at once. As the flames respond, you feel yourself settle into the rhythm that will carry you through the hours ahead. The motions are familiar, almost soothing. There is comfort in repetition, in tasks that do not require choice or debate. The fire does not argue, it only reacts. Behind you, the kitchen slowly begins to wake. Another cook enters, rubbing sleep from their eyes, nodding to you without words. A boy follows, carrying water that sloshes dangerously close to the rim of the bucket. He concentrates hard, as if focus alone can keep it from spilling. Someone else coughs again, louder this time, and clears their throat as if preparing for a long day of smoke. Tools are gathered. Knives are checked, their edges uneven, but serviceable. A sack of grain is dragged closer to the millstone. You can already hear the faint scrape it will make once the grinding begins, a sound that will weave itself through the day like a dull chant. Outside, the world is beginning to lighten, though you cannot see it from here. Somewhere above, nobles still sleep in rooms that smell of lavender instead of soot. Somewhere beyond the walls, fields wait quietly, dew settling on crops that will one day make their way into this room. None of that feels close. Your world is here, bounded by stone and fire. You glance at the shelves, lining one wall. Jars of salt, herbs, dried roots. Some are carefully sealed, others are not. You try not to think too hard about which is which. You have learned that inspection can lead to hesitation, and hesitation leads to trouble. Fire and spice solve many problems, or at least hide them well enough. The quiet does not last long. As more people arrive, the kitchen fills with movement. Orders are not shouted yet, but they are implied, hovering in the air like the smoke itself. Breakfast must be prepared, then another meal, then another. The day stretches ahead, long and heavy, but strangely predictable. You know how it will feel in your body before it happens. You know where it will ache, where it will burn, where it will numb. You roll your shoulders once, loosening stiffness that never truly leaves. Your hands already smell faintly of ash. By midday, they will smell of everything else. For now, though, there is a brief, fragile balance. The fire is alive. The kitchen is awake, but not yet frantic. The bell has not rung. You stand in the half-light, breathing smoke-softened air, and accept what you already know without resentment or surprise. The fire's never left, neither did you. You step fully into the kitchen, and the space closes around you the way it always does. Not suddenly, but patiently, as if it has been waiting for you to arrive and resume your place inside it. The air here is thicker than anywhere else in the castle, layered with smoke that never quite rises high enough to escape and never sinks low enough to settle. It hangs just below the ceiling, a permanent grey veil pressed into the stone, darkening it year by year. Your eyes adjust slowly. Firelight does not behave like daylight. It flickers and shifts, turning solid objects uncertain at the edges. Shadows move even when nothing else does. Hooks along the walls hold pots so blackened they no longer show their original metal. Wooden tables are scarred with cuts and burns, their surfaces sticky in places, despite repeated scraping. Grease has worked its way into every crack, every joint, every grain of wood. It shines faintly when the fire flares, as if the kitchen itself sweats. You breathe in without meaning to, and the smell arrives in layers. Smoke first, then fat old and new together. Something sour lingers beneath it all, faint but persistent, like a memory that refuses to fade. It is the smell of work that never truly ends, only pauses long enough to be resumed. The stone floor is cool beneath your feet, near the edges of the room, but closer to the hearth it grows warm, almost comforting, though never enough to dry it completely. Moisture gathers here, from spilled water, from steam, from whatever leaks through the walls when the weather turns damp. You learn where to step by instinct, shifting your weight slightly to avoid patches that feel slick underfoot. Falling is not dramatic here. It is simply inconvenient and painful, and it will not delay the work. The fire crackles as you move past it, reacting to your presence the way a living thing might. You feed it more wood, not because it is dying, but because it always wants more. Flames stretch upward eagerly, licking the blackened stone, leaving fresh soot to join the old. No one remembers what colour the walls once were. No one expects to see it again. Around you, the kitchen continues to wake, though it never truly slept. A pot is lifted, its contents stirred slowly, releasing a new wave of scent that spreads and blends with everything else. Someone drags a bench closer to a table, the sound scraping along stone with no urgency, just necessity. A chicken clucks somewhere it should not be, unbothered by the fact that it will not be here forever. You move through the space without thinking much about where you are going. The kitchen has taught your body its geography over years of repetition. You know how far it is from the hearth to the water bucket by the number of steps it takes. You know which table leans slightly and which one will splinter if struck too hard. You know where the ceiling drips after heavy rain and which corner smells worse when the heat rises. Yesterday has left its mark everywhere. A smear of something dark along the edge of a table, crumbs pressed into the floor near the breadboard, a pot set aside because there was no more strength left to clean it properly. None of this causes alarm. This is simply how time behaves here, piling gently but relentlessly, never fully erased. You rinse your hands in water that is cold and faintly cloudy, rubbing them together until the worst of the ash loosens. The water does not become clean, so much as redistributed. You shake your hands dry, droplets scattering onto the floor where they will vanish into the general dampness. Clean enough is the standard. Cleaner than before is a luxury. The open flames dominate the room, not just in heat, but in sound. The steady hiss of burning wood, the occasional pop of sap, the low roar when air rushes in through a draft. It creates a constant backdrop that fills the silence so completely that when it falters, everyone notices. Fire is the closest thing this kitchen has to a heartbeat. As more people arrive, the room grows warmer, louder, heavier. Bodies add heat, movement stirs the air, the smell deepens. Someone sets down a slab of meat with a dull thud. You do not look too closely at it. You have learned that distance is sometimes the best seasoning. You trust the fire. You trust salt. You trust time, though time rarely returns the favour. The ceiling feels low despite its height. Smoke presses downward, settling into your hair and clothes almost immediately. By the end of the day, you will feel as though you are carrying the kitchen with you wherever you go. There is no shaking it off. Even outside, even in fresh air, it clings stubbornly. You pass by a stack of firewood, rough bark scraping your sleeve. Splinters catch in the fabric. Small reminders of how easily skin can be torn here. You brush them away absently. Small injuries are expected. They heal or they do not. Either way, the kitchen continues. Somewhere nearby, grain begins to grind against stone. The sound is low and rhythmic, almost soothing if you do not think about how long it will last. Flour dust rises faintly into the air, briefly visible, before it settles onto every surface within reach. It softens the edges of things, muting colours that were already dulled by smoke. You know it will cling to sweat later, forming a thin paste on skin and cloth. A pot begins to bubble, slow and steady. You stir it carefully, feeling resistance through the spoon. The contents move thickly, reluctantly, releasing heat that rises toward your face. You lean back slightly, avoiding the worst of it. Steam curls upward, disappearing into the smoky ceiling, where it joins countless others. The kitchen does not rush. It does not need to. The demands will come regardless of pace. Lords will wake hungry. Bells will ring. Plates will be expected to appear as if by magic, without regard for how they came to be. Down here, time stretches and folds in on itself, measured not by hours but by tasks completed and tasks waiting. You notice how sound behaves in this space. Voices echo just enough to blur together, turning conversation into a low murmur. Words are rarely important. Instructions are given with gestures as often as speech. A nod, a raised eyebrow, a hand tapping a surface. Everyone here understands the language of necessity. The air grows warmer as the fire strengthens. Sweat gathers at your temples, along your back, beneath your arms. It mixes with smoke and flour and grease, forming a scent that is unmistakably human. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve, leaving a faint smear that will darken over time. There is no window here, only narrow openings meant more for ventilation than light. Dawn arrives indirectly, announced by subtle changes rather than brightness. The grey outside lightens slightly, shadows soften. The kitchen remains much the same. You pause for a moment, standing still amid the movement, and feel the weight of the place settle around you. The stone walls have absorbed centuries of sound, heat and labour. They have heard complaints and curses and laughter that did not last. They have witnessed hands like yours repeat the same motions again and again, each believing, perhaps briefly, that things might someday be different. The thought does not linger. There is no room for it here. A smell sharpens suddenly, drawing your attention back to the work. Something needs turning. Something else needs watching. The kitchen does not forgive distraction. You step closer to the hearth again, adjusting a pot, shifting embers with a practiced flick of the wrist. The fire responds immediately, flames leaping higher, light dancing across the walls. For a moment, everything feels almost alive in a way that is difficult to name. Then it settles, returning to its steady burn. The kitchen hums around you, fully awake now, though it never truly rests. Yesterday has become today without ceremony. The mess has not disappeared. It has only changed shape, waiting calmly to be transformed again under your hands. You remain where you are, surrounded by stone and smoke and sound, knowing that this place will carry you forward, whether you wish it to or not. and that before long the rhythm you have fallen into will feel like the only one you have ever known. The work gathers weight as the hour advances, not suddenly, but with a steady inevitability, like dough rising when left too close to the fire. What began as quiet preparation now thickens into expectation. Somewhere above, doors are opening, footsteps sound in halls you will not see, voices clear themselves in anticipation of being heard. Hunger is waking, and with it, judgment. You feel it before anyone tells you. The kitchen has a way of sensing these things. Hands move faster now, though no one appears rushed. There is an unspoken understanding that time has tightened. Pots are nudged closer to heat, lids are lifted, contents inspected, adjusted by eye and instinct rather than measurement. Salt is added in pinches that feel correct, though correctness here is always provisional. What satisfies one mouth displeases another, and the mouths that matter most will never explain why. The food being prepared grows more elaborate as it moves closer to its destination. What begins as simple meat becomes layered with sauce. Bread is cut, dressed, warmed. Herbs are chosen not for subtlety, but for confidence, their presence meant to reassure those who believe richness is proof of care. Fire is used generously, both to cook and to disguise. You work carefully, knowing that each motion leaves a trace. Not a trace that will be noticed by those who eat, but one that will be felt by those who remain behind. A sauce scorched slightly at the bottom of the pot will still be served. It will be strained, stirred, sweetened, smoothed into something presentable. The taste will be judged nonetheless. As dishes are assembled, the contrast sharpens. Here, the air is thick, the floor slick, the heat relentless. Above, linen will be spread. Hands will be washed. Complaints will be delivered with measured tones, as if disappointment itself were a kind of refinement. You lift a platter, heavier than it looks, the warmth seeping through cloth into your palms. It smells rich, filling, convincing. It smells like effort. You pass it along to someone whose path leads upward, away from the fire. The moment it leaves your hands, it begins to change. Distance lends it mystery. By the time it reaches the table, it will be judged not as the product of labour, but as a promise, either kept or broken. You return to the hearth, already preparing what comes next. There is no pause to consider whether what you have sent will be well received. That knowledge arrives later, filtered through balance or tone, rather than words. Praise is rare and vague. Dissatisfaction, when it comes, is oddly specific. A lid rattles, a spoon scrapes the bottom of a pot. Someone tastes and frowns, then tastes again, adjusting with a practiced resignation. The food here is not meant to be enjoyed by those who make it. It is meant to survive the journey upward and return without consequence. As more dishes leave the kitchen, the room seems to hollow slightly, as if exhaling. Then it fills again with the next round of demands. Meat must be sliced evenly, though no one will notice if it is not. Sauce must be thick enough to coat the tongue, thin enough to be mistaken for elegance. Bread must be warm, but not too warm. Nothing should surprise. You think briefly of the hands that will lift forks and knives. Clean hands, soft hands, hands that have not held hot iron or scrubbed stone. Those hands will pause mid-air, hesitate, then proceed, confident that what lies before them exists solely for their pleasure. When the complaints arrive, they do so indirectly. A servant returns, expression carefully neutral, delivering words softened by politeness but sharpened by implication. Too salty, too bland, overcooked, underdone, not what was expected, rarely what was asked for. The words settle into the kitchen like additional smoke, absorbed without resistance. You nod because nodding is easier than explaining. You make adjustments, though you're not told precisely what to change. You're expected to know. That expectation is the heaviest ingredient of all. The absurdity of it never quite disappears. The people who decide whether the food is acceptable have never stood near this fire. They do not know how the smoke stings the eyes, how heat presses inward until thought softens at the edges. They do not know how meat behaves when it arrives already halfway to spoiling, or how water tastes when it has travelled too far through stone and earth. And yet they are certain when something is wrong. You stir again, slower this time, as if patience itself might improve the result. The fire flickers, responding without opinion. It burns what it is given. It asks nothing more. Plates continue to move upward, and with each one, the kitchen sheds a little more of itself. The noise shifts. The grinding stone falls silent. The chopping slows. Attention narrows. All eyes track the remaining pots, the last dishes that must be right enough. There is a strange intimacy in this moment, a shared understanding among those who remain. No one speaks much. There is no need. Each person knows their role, their limits. Mistakes are not catastrophic here. They are cumulative. When the final platter leaves, the kitchen exhales more fully. The heat remains, but the pressure eases. The work is not done, but it has changed shape again. Now comes waiting. You stand near the hearth, hands resting on the edge of a table, feeling the warmth soak into your bones. Sweat cools on your skin. The smell of food lingers, though you are not hungry. Hunger behaves differently when you're surrounded by what you cannot enjoy. Somewhere above, chewing begins. Conversation resumes. Judgment unfolds quietly, behind stone and distance. You will not hear laughter clearly, but you will sense its absence. When feedback arrives, it is never immediate. It drifts down later, wrapped in other tasks, other instructions. A dish will not be requested again. An ingredient will be avoided. A tone will change. These are the signals you learn to read, because they are the only ones offered. You clean as you wait, because stillness invites thought, and thought is not always useful here. Pots are scraped, utensils are set aside. A spill is wiped half-heartedly, knowing it will return in another form. The floor grows slick again, layered with the residue of effort. Eventually, someone nods. Enough has been done, for now. The powerful have been fed, though satisfaction remains elusive. It always does. You remain where you are, surrounded by heat and stone, aware that this cycle will repeat itself with the next bell, the next appetite, the next quiet dissatisfaction. And you accept it, not because it makes sense, but because acceptance is the only seasoning that never runs out. The kitchen settles into a lower, steadier rhythm once the first wave of hunger has been answered. The fire continues its patient work, no longer flaring in urgency, but never allowed to fade. Smoke drifts upward in slow, lazy currents, carrying with it the smells that define this place more clearly than stone or sound ever could. It is within this softened pace that the next task arrives, carried not by announcement, but by presence. The meat waits. It is brought in without ceremony, laid out on thick boards that have known generations of the same purpose. The surface beneath it is scarred and darkened, shaped by blades and time. You look at the meat without staring, because staring invites questions, and questions are rarely useful here. You have learned to let your eyes register only what is necessary. Size, cut, texture, weight, anything beyond that is excess information. The smell reaches you before thought does. It is not one thing but many, layered together. Iron, dampness, something sweet beginning to turn. It does not announce danger so much as history. This animal has travelled. It has waited. It has been handled by hands that did not linger. Freshness here is not a fixed moment but a spectrum, and this lies somewhere along it, not ideal, not alarming, simply familiar. You inhale shallowly through your nose, then breathe out through your mouth. The scent becomes manageable once acknowledged. Denial would be more tiring. You adjust your grip on the knife, feeling its worn handle settle into your palm. The blade has been sharpened recently, though sharpness itself is another flexible concept. You work with what you have. There is no ritual of inspection, no moment of reverence. This is not a place for ceremony. The animal's life ended somewhere else, under circumstances that no longer matter. What matters now is transformation. Fire, salt, time, these are the tools that turn uncertainty into something acceptable. As you begin to cut, the sound is dull and wet, absorbed quickly by the thick wood. The knife moves steadily, guided by memory rather than thought. You know where resistance will be greater, where sinew will pull back, where bone will interrupt your progress. You work around it without frustration. Frustration wastes energy, and energy is already spoken for. Nearby, someone else works on another piece, their motions slightly different but no less practiced. No one comments on smell or colour. Conversation here stays practical, focused on placement, timing, portions. Anything else would slow the work, and slowness has consequences. The fire is prepared in advance, flames adjusted to receive what you will give it. Heat is the great equalizer. It does not care how long something waited, or where it came from, or why it smells the way it does. It only asks for patience and attention. Too little, and the problem remains visible. Too much, and it announces itself differently. You season generously, though generosity here is strategic rather than kind. Salt draws out moisture, masks uncertainty, convinces the tongue that intention was present. Herbs follow, chosen less for flavour than for reassurance. Their scent rises immediately, mingling with the meat, reshaping the air around you. It is a familiar alchemy. What was questionable becomes convincing. As pieces are placed near the heat, the smell changes. Sharpness softens, sweetness deepens. Fat begins to melt and drip, hissing softly as it meets flame. Smoke thickens, carrying the new scent upward, replacing what came before. This is the moment you trust most. Fire rarely lies. You stand close, watching, turning pieces at intervals. You have learned to feel rather than measure. The surface darkens, edges crisping slightly. What lay hidden is sealed inside. Appearances improve quickly. This too is part of the craft. You do not think about the hands that will eat this. Thinking too much about the final destination makes the present task heavier than it needs to be. Instead, you focus on what you can control. Evenness, heat, timing. These things still answer to you, at least for now. Occasionally, a piece is set aside. Not discarded, just redirected. It will find another use, another form. Nothing here is wasted without reason. Waste suggests abundance. An abundance is reserved for appearances. The air grows richer as more meat meets fire. The scent spreads through the kitchen, seeping into stone and cloth alike. It is the kind of smell that suggests comfort to those who will encounter it later, without context. They will not know what it smelled like before. They will not need to. Your hands grow slick despite frequent wiping. Fat coats your fingers, clings beneath your nails. You rub them against a cloth that has already given up any claim to cleanliness. The sensation barely registers. Your body has adjusted its expectations. At some point you notice hunger flicker briefly at the edge of awareness. Not sharp, not urgent, more a memory than a need. You let it pass. Eating comes later, if it comes at all, and it will not look like this. A piece is tested, pressed lightly with the knife. It yields the way it should. You nod once, satisfied enough. Satisfaction here is quiet and temporary. You move on without pause. There is a strange intimacy in this work, a closeness that would be unsettling if examined too closely. You are aware of texture, of resistance, of change under heat. You respond without sentiment. This is not cruelty, it is practicality, honed by repetition. When the meat is ready to move on, it does so without comment. It is lifted, arranged, combined with other elements that further obscure its past. Sauces cover surfaces. Garnishes distract the eye. Presentation completes what fire began. The smell that remains behind is heavier now, fuller. It settles into the kitchen, the way smoke always does, claiming space. It will linger long after the last plate leaves, long after the fire is banked again. You will carry it with you, whether you wish to or not. As the task concludes, there is no sense of relief, only transition. Hands rinse briefly. Knives are wiped and set down. The boards remain where they are, marked anew but unchanged in essence. They have seen worse. They will see more. You stand for a moment, feeling the heat at your back, the stone cool at your front. The work has shifted again, quietly, without announcement. Questions have been avoided, as they always are. Answers, when they exist, belong to someone else. Here, trust is placed in flame and seasoning, not because they are noble, but because they are reliable. And in a place like this, reliability is worth more than certainty. As the heavier scents of meat and fire settle into the stones, another sound takes prominence, quieter but more persistent. It begins as a low scrape, almost gentle, then steadies into rhythm, stone against stone, grain surrendering slowly. The millstone does not hurry, it never has. You move toward it without being called, hands already anticipating the texture they will soon be coated in. Flour dust hangs faintly in the air nearby, catching the firelight in pale motes that drift and settle wherever gravity allows. It softens the kitchen's sharp edges, muting the dark surfaces with a thin, powdery veil. For a moment, the place almost looks calm. The grain waits in sacks stacked against the wall, their coarse fabric rough beneath your fingers. As you pull one closer, it smells dry and earthy, a simple scent compared to everything else that fills the room. You open the sack and scoop out a measure by feel, pouring it into the waiting stone. The millstone accepts it without reaction. It never reacts. It only turns. Your hands grip the handle, and you begin to push. The first rotation is always the heaviest. Muscles wake reluctantly, protesting before settling into effort. The stone resists, then yields, grinding steadily as grain disappears beneath its weight. The sound deepens, becoming almost musical in its consistency. It fills the spaces between louder tasks, weaving itself into the kitchen's constant murmur. Flour begins to gather below, warm from friction, fine enough to cling to your skin. It coats your fingers, creeps into the creases of your knuckles, dulls the lines of your palms. Soon it will find your sleeves, your hair, your face. You do not brush it away. There is no point. It will return. The motion becomes automatic. Push, shift, push again. Your shoulders fall into a familiar ache, not sharp enough to demand attention, just present enough to remind you that time is passing. This work will take hours. It always does. Bread is patient, and it demands patience in return. Around you, the kitchen continues its quiet choreography. Pots simmer, fires are fed. Someone passes behind you carrying water, careful not to disturb the rhythm. No one interrupts the grinding. It is understood that this sound must continue, that stopping it without reason would feel wrong, like interrupting breathing. When the grain is finished, you gather the flour, lifting it with cupped hands, feeling its warmth fade as it meets cooler air. You move to the table where dough will be made, the surface already dusted from earlier efforts. This table knows you well. It has felt your weight, leaning into it countless times, absorbed sweat and flour and fatigue without complaint. Water is added carefully. Not too much, not too little. You judge by feel rather than measure, fingertips pressing into the mixture as it comes together reluctantly, then willingly. Dough resists at first, then softens, stretching under your hands. It clings slightly, testing your patience. You knead steadily, folding and pressing. letting the motion repeat until thought drifts elsewhere. There is comfort in this repetition. Bread does not surprise you. It behaves according to rules that remain mostly consistent, unlike so many other things here. It rises when conditions allow. It fails when they do not. You learn to read its moods, adjusting without frustration. If a loaf turns out dense, it will still be eaten. If it cracks oddly, it will still be served. Perfection is not required. Sufficiency is enough. Your arms ache now, the steady push and pull making itself known. You adjust your stance, shifting weight from one foot to the other on the cold stone floor. The ache deepens but remains manageable. It is the kind of pain that accompanies productivity, the sort that reassures you that something tangible is being made. As loaves are shaped and set aside to rise, time stretches again. You cover them loosely, protecting them from drafts that slip through unseen cracks. The warmth of the kitchen encourages growth, coaxing air into the dough. It is a quiet miracle, repeated daily until it loses its wonder. While you wait, you grind more grain. There is always more. The millstone turns and turns, its surface smoothed further by use. It has been here longer than you. It will remain long after you are gone, serving other hands, other bodies, repeating the same task with the same indifference. Flour dust thickens in the air, settling on everything indiscriminately. It dulls the shine of metal, softens the blackened stone. It even tempers the smell, absorbing some of the sharper notes left behind by meat and fire. For a brief while, the kitchen smells almost simple. Grain, heat, effort. When the loaves are ready, you move them toward the oven. The heat there is different from the open hearth, enclosed and intense. You slide the bread inside with practiced care, mindful of space and timing. Too close together, and they bake unevenly, too far apart, and space is wasted. There is always a balance to strike. As the bread bakes, the smell changes again. Warmth deepens into something comforting, something that suggests stability. Bread is expected, bread is reliable. It does not carry the same risks as meat, the same questions. It arrives as it should, filling bellies without comment. Your stomach notices this smell more insistently than the others. It tightens, then settles. You swallow and continue working. Eating comes later, if at all. For now, the smell is enough. When the loaves are removed, their crusts crack softly as they cool, releasing steam that rises and vanishes into smoke-darkened air. You stack them carefully, aware of their weight, their warmth. They will be cut and served and consumed without much thought. No one will remark on the hours spent grinding grain, kneading dough, tending heat. Bread is assumed. Its presence is noticed only when it is missing. Your hands are white now, dusted thickly with flour that has mixed with sweat to form a paste in places. You rinse them briefly, watching the water turn cloudy, then grey. You shake them dry and return to the work. There is always another batch to prepare, another sack to empty. As the millstone turns again, you feel time blur slightly. The rhythm lulls thought into a gentler state. Push, turn, grind, the ache in your arms becomes background noise, steady and unremarkable. This too is part of why leaving feels impossible. The work shapes you until imagining anything else requires effort you no longer possess. Bread continues to rise and bake and cool, marking the passage of hours more reliably than bells ever could. The kitchen hums around you, sustained by repetition. Nothing here is finished. It only moves forward, one loaf at a time, carried by hands that know the work too well to question it anymore. The rhythm you settle into never belongs to you alone. As hands move and tools find their places, other lives drift in and out of the kitchen with equal confidence, as if this space were meant to accommodate all creatures willing to endure it. The door is rarely shut tightly. Even when it is, gaps remain. The kitchen breathes through them, and so do its visitors. A chicken wanders in first, uninvited but unsurprising. It steps across the stone floor with small decisive movements, head bobbing as it surveys the room. It has learned that warmth and scraps live here, that people are loud but mostly harmless, that attention is temporary. You notice it only when it hops onto a low bench, feathers brushing against a bowl you set down moments earlier. You do not chase it. Chasing causes noise, and noise causes disruption. Instead, you adjust your position slightly, nudging the bowl farther from the edge. The chicken watches, unimpressed, then hops down again, claws clicking softly against stone. It pecks once at nothing in particular and moves on. Near the far wall, something larger shifts. A pig, small but determined, noses its way toward a bucket that has not yet been moved. Its ears twitch, responding to sounds only it seems to hear. You catch sight of it just as it presses its snout against the wood, testing boundaries with quiet persistence. You sigh, not loudly enough to matter, and step over. The pig looks up at you briefly, eyes dark and calm, then returns to its investigation. You guide it away with a hand against its shoulder, firm but familiar. It grunts softly, more annoyed than afraid, and shuffles toward another corner where it will wait for a better opportunity. This is how it goes. Animals here are not intruders so much as co-workers with different priorities. They live close enough to the kitchen to know its rhythms, its weaknesses. They understand that patience is rewarded. You understand that resistance is pointless. Rodents are less obvious but more numerous. You hear them before you see them, a faint rustle behind shelves, the soft scrape of claws against stone. They move when they think you are not looking, though they misjudge your awareness. You have learned to account for their presence without acknowledging it. Flour sacks are tied carefully. Bread is kept elevated. Meat is covered, weighed down, guarded by proximity rather than locks. Occasionally, one is bold enough to dart across open space. It moves quickly, a blur of grey against darker stone. Someone curses softly. A foot lifts, but the moment passes. The rat disappears into shadow, unpunished, unchanged. There will be others. You return to your work, adjusting tools, wiping surfaces, with cloths that smell faintly of old water and older effort. The kitchen does not demand sterility. It demands vigilance, a constant low-level awareness that something is always nearby, always reaching. Then there are the children. They arrive in pairs or clusters, assigned here by someone who believes proximity to work builds character. They stand just inside the doorway at first, watching with wide eyes, absorbing heat and sound and motion all at once. Their hands hang awkwardly at their sides, unsure where to rest. One steps forward, clutching a small bowl with both hands. It is too full. You can see that immediately. The liquid inside trembles with each step, threatening to escape. You open your mouth to warn them, then close it again. Experience has taught you that warning rarely arrives in time. The bowl tips. Water spills across the floor, spreading quickly, finding low places. The child freezes, eyes widening further, waiting for a reaction. You feel irritation rise, then flatten. This too is familiar. You take the bowl gently, set it aside, and hand the child a cloth. Your gesture is calm, deliberate. Panic helps no one. The child kneels and begins to wipe, spreading the water more than removing it. You let them try. Learning takes time, and time is something you have learned to spend carefully. Another child hovers nearby, reaching for a knife that has been left within reach. You intercept with a hand placed lightly but firmly over theirs. They look up at you, confused rather than offended. You shake your head once. They withdraw their hand and settle for watching instead. They mean well, that is the trouble. Children here want to help because helping is expected. They want to be useful, to be seen. They do not yet understand how easily usefulness turns into liability. You assign them small tasks when possible. carrying bread from one table to another, holding a door open, fetching water under supervision. These tasks keep their hands occupied and their curiosity directed away from danger. Even so, something is always dropped. A loaf slips and lands on the floor, collecting grit and flour. You brush it off and set it aside. It will be eaten anyway. Nothing here is perfect enough to be discarded for touching stone. The noise level rises subtly with their presence. Small voices murmur, feet scuff. Laughter threatens to break through before being swallowed by the larger sounds of the kitchen. You allow it briefly. Joy is rare enough to tolerate in small doses. Animals weave between legs as the children move, unconcerned by size differences or hierarchy. A chicken darts unexpectedly, causing a child to gasp and stumble. You catch them by the shoulder before they fall into the hearth's warmth. Their heart pounds beneath your hand. They grin, breathless, already turning the moment into a story they will tell later. You release them and return to the work without comment. This shared space requires constant negotiation. Every movement must account for something unpredictable. A tail flicks where you intend to step. A small hand reaches where heat lives. A rat chooses the wrong moment to cross open ground. You learn to work with your awareness spread wide, never fully focused on one task alone. It is exhausting in a quiet way. Your body responds before your mind does, adjusting posture, redirecting steps, catching spills and stumbles with practiced ease. You have become good at this, though no one has ever said so. Competence here is invisible until it fails. As the hours pass, the children grow tired. Their enthusiasm softens into distraction. Someone calls them away eventually. Their duties elsewhere remembered at last. They leave behind smudges, half-cleaned spills, and a faint echo of noise that takes time to fade. The animals remain. They always do. You shoo a chicken gently from beneath a table, guide the pig away from a cooling loaf, stomp once to discourage unseen movement behind the shelves. The kitchen settles back into its usual state, crowded but manageable, alive in ways that defy order. Your hands ache now, fingers stiff from gripping and releasing, palms tender beneath layers of flour and grease. You rinse them again, watching water bead and run off skin that has grown tough enough not to mind much anymore. As you dry them on your apron, you glance around the room. The fire still burns, the stone still holds heat, the smells still linger, layered and inseparable. The kitchen remains what it always is, a place where control is partial, where assistance arrives uninvited, where survival depends on adaptation rather than authority. You step carefully around a final wandering chicken, adjust a pot that has been nudged out of place, and continue. The work does not pause for chaos. It absorbs it, folds it in, and carries on, asking only that you do the same. By the time your hands begin to feel gritty rather than simply tired, you know it is time to think about water again. Not because it is abundant, and not because it is refreshing, but because the work has reached that familiar point where everything has become coated in a thin, stubborn film. Flour, grease, ash, sweat. They layer themselves patiently, as if confident they will not be challenged often. The bucket near the wall waits where it always does, its surface worn smooth by fingers hooking under the rim. You lift it and feel the weight immediately. Water is heavy, in a way that feels personal. It reminds you that nothing here arrives easily. Each drop has travelled, carried by arms much like yours, hauled from a well or cistern that never seems quite close enough. You tilt the bucket slightly, peering inside. The water looks acceptable enough. That is the highest praise it will receive. It is not clear, not fresh in any romantic sense, but it does not actively offend. There is a faint smell of stone and earth, a suggestion of iron, perhaps something else you choose not to identify too closely. You nod once, satisfied or resigned. the distinction rarely matters. You pour a small amount into a shallow basin, careful not to waste it. Water here is not for comfort. It is for necessity, divided carefully between tasks that compete quietly for it. Tools first, always tools. A knife is dipped, swirled briefly, wiped with a cloth that is only marginally cleaner than the blade itself. This is not cleansing so much as negotiation. You remove what will interfere with the next cut, what will catch the eye or stick unpleasantly. Perfection is not expected, function is. You rinse a spoon, a ladle, your fingers moving automatically, aware of how quickly the water clouds. It does not take much, a few seconds of contact, and it changes character, becoming something else entirely. You set the basin aside, unwilling to discard what can still serve another purpose. Food comes next. A vegetable is rinsed quickly, turned once in the water, surface dirt loosening just enough to be ignored. You lift it out, shake it dry, and place it on the table. It will be cut, cooked, transformed. The water has done its part. Your hands hover over the basin for a moment longer than necessary. They itch slightly beneath the grime, skin tight from heat and labour. You dip them in briefly, rubbing palms together, feeling the grit shift and redistribute rather than disappear. The water cools your skin for a heartbeat, then warms almost immediately. You withdraw your hands and dry them on your apron, which absorbs moisture without complaint. You glance back into the basin. The water has lost its innocence entirely now. It is cloudy, tinged faintly grey, carrying traces of everything it has touched. You do not discard it yet. It still has uses. Floors do not require purity, neither do walls. You carry the basin carefully, sloshing just enough to keep the contents from settling too heavily at the bottom. You pour a portion onto a particularly slick patch of stone and scrub with a stiff brush. The water spreads, darkens, carries grease along its path before settling into the cracks where it will remain. The floor looks marginally improved. That will have to be enough. Fetching more water is a task that never quite ends. Each trip feels longer than the last, the path to the source winding through corridors that grow narrower and colder as you move away from the kitchen's heat. Stone underfoot is damp here, the air cooler, smelling faintly of mould and mineral. You adjust your grip on the bucket, feeling strain travel up your arms, settling into your shoulders. At the well, you lower the bucket slowly, listening to the rope creak, feeling vibrations travel through your hands. The water below responds with a soft splash. You pull it back up, muscles tightening, breath slowing to match the effort. This water, too, looks acceptable. You have learned not to expect more. As you carry it back, you pass others doing the same, exchanging brief nods, unspoken acknowledgements of shared burden. No one lingers. Water is meant to be moved, not admired. Back in the kitchen, the new water is rationed immediately. A small amount is set aside for food preparation. Another portion is claimed by someone tending to pots. A bit is reserved for later, when hands grow too sticky or eyes sting too much from smoke. None of it is wasted deliberately. Accidents happen, spills occur, but intention remains careful. You notice how quickly water becomes memory here. The moment it is poured, it begins its transformation, absorbing the kitchen's character until it is no longer what it was. Cleanliness is temporary, fleeting, a state that must be constantly renewed but never fully achieved. Your face feels tight now, skin coated with a fine layer of soot and sweat. You hesitate, then allow yourself a small indulgence. You cup a bit of water in your hands and bring it to your face, splashing lightly. The sensation is brief but grounding. Your eyes sting slightly, then clear. You wipe your face with your sleeve and feel marginally more present. The relief does not last. It never does. The heat presses in again. The air thick with smoke and scent. Your skin dries quickly, leaving behind the same residue you attempted to remove. Still, the moment mattered. Small mercies count here. You notice a child watching you from near the doorway, mimicking your motions with empty hands. You meet their gaze briefly, then hand them the basin you no longer need. They carry it away carefully, sloshing water that will soon find another purpose. Learning happens quietly, without instruction. As the day continues, water becomes scarcer, buckets empty, basins are reused, cloths grow heavier with dampness and grime. You wring one out over the floor, watching droplets fall and vanish. There is something meditative about it, the way water moves through the kitchen, changing form, changing purpose, never lingering long enough to be missed. The smell of the place shifts subtly as moisture meets heat. Steam rises in thin threads, joining smoke near the ceiling. The air grows heavier, more difficult to breathe deeply. You adapt by breathing shallowly, conserving effort. You rinse your hands one final time before returning fully to the work, accepting that they will never be truly clean today, or tomorrow, or the day after. Clean enough is the goal, safe enough, acceptable enough. As you set the bucket back in its place, you feel the familiar weight of limitation settle in. Water governs more than washing here. It shapes habits, expectations, compromises. It teaches restraint better than any rule ever could. You dry your hands, adjust your apron, and turn back toward the hearth. The fire waits, it always does, and with it the understanding that whatever water cannot fix, heat will attempt to finish. The fire no longer announces itself, it simply exists, a steady presence that has worked its way into your awareness so deeply that you stop noticing it as something separate from yourself. The hearth radiates outward in waves, warming the front of your body, while your back remains faintly chilled by stone and draft. You shift occasionally, not to escape the heat, but to redistribute it, letting different muscles take their turn absorbing the strain. Time behaves differently here. It does not move forward so much as circulate, looping gently around the hearth. You mark its passage not by light or bells, but by the behavior of the fire and the requests that arrive without warning. When the flames dip, you feed them. When they surge too eagerly, you pull back. The rhythm becomes instinctive, guided by feel rather than thought. Your face grows flushed, skin tight and dry where heat lingers longest. Sweat forms and evaporates almost immediately, leaving behind salt that prickles faintly. You wipe your brow with the back of your hand, leaving a faint streak that will darken and blend in with the rest. There is no mirror here, no reason to consider how you look. The fire does not care. As you stand, tend, wait, the sounds of the kitchen soften into something less distinct. The crackle of burning wood, the hiss of fat meeting flame, the occasional clatter of metal against stone. They merge into a single low presence, like distant surf. Your thoughts slow to match it. Sharp edges round off. Urgency dissolves into repetition. Another pot needs attention. You stir without counting the turns, watching the surface respond. Bubbles rise and burst lazily. Steam lifts and disappears into the familiar haze overhead. You lean in slightly, inhaling, then pull back as heat presses too close. The motion feels rehearsed, as though your body learned it long ago and simply repeats it now. The fire demands constancy rather than drama. It rewards attention with predictability, punishes neglect quietly but firmly. You remain close because distance invites mistakes. The hearth becomes your anchor point, the place you orbit as everything else shifts around it. Somewhere beyond the kitchen, life continues. Footsteps pass in corridors above, voices rise and fall. But here, those sounds arrive muted, filtered through layers of stone and smoke. They feel unreal, like echoes from another place. The kitchen remains its own small world, governed by heat and habit. You notice how your legs grow heavy first, standing in one place weight settling unevenly, sends a dull ache upward from your feet into your knees, your hips. You shift again, careful not to step too far from the hearth. Movement helps, but only briefly. Stillness returns quickly. Hunger flares and fades without pattern. Sometimes the smell of food stirs it sharply, only to leave you in different moments later. Your body learns to delay, to accept postponement as normal. Eating will happen when it happens. For now, the fire takes priority. Light changes subtly, though you do not look toward its source. The firelight remains constant, masking the sun's slow progress. Shadows stretch and shrink, but here they always look the same, distorted and unreliable. If the day were ending or beginning, you might not notice immediately. You add wood again, listening for the sound that tells you it has caught. There is satisfaction in that sound, small and contained. It tells you something is working as it should. You linger a moment longer than necessary, watching flames settle into their new shape. Then you move on. Your hands feel swollen now, fingers stiff from heat and repeated motion. You flex them slowly, joints cracking faintly. The sound is swallowed by the larger noises around you. Pain exists, but it has lost its urgency. It is simply there, a background condition. Time continues to soften. The idea of morning or afternoon becomes abstract. There are only moments when something is needed and moments when it is not. A bowl appears beside you, empty, waiting. You fill it without question. A platter returns, scraped clean, its purpose complete. You accept it, stack it, rinse it quickly, set it aside. The cycle repeats. Occasionally, someone passes close enough for you to feel a brief change in air temperature. Their presence registers as a shadow, a movement, then fades. Words are exchanged sparingly, voices low, as if loud speech might disturb the balance the fire demands. You realize, distantly, that you have been standing in nearly the same place for a long while. The thought arrives without alarm. There is nowhere else you need to be. The hearth defines your radius. Step too far, and you feel unmoored. The firelight flickers across your arms, highlighting flower streaks, old burns, scars you no longer remember earning. They catch the light briefly, then disappear again. Your body bears quiet records of days much like this one, layered and indistinct. A pot is removed, another set in its place. The exchange happens smoothly, practiced hands working together without discussion. Heat surges, then settles. You adjust, always adjusting. At some point, fatigue deepens into something softer, almost pleasant. Your mind drifts slightly, thoughts stretching out, unhurried. You think of nothing in particular. The fire fills the space where worry might otherwise take hold. If someone were to ask you what time it is, you would not know how to answer. The question itself would feel misplaced. Time here is not measured in numbers. It is measured in fuel consumed, in food transformed, in the slow accumulation of heat within your bones. You stand and the standing becomes its own state, neither active nor passive. The fire holds you there, asking only that you remain attentive enough to keep it alive. In return, it offers warmth, consistency, and the gentle erasure of urgency. As another demand arrives and is met, as another moment folds quietly into the next, the day continues to blur, edges dissolving, leaving only heat, motion, and the steady understanding that as long as the fire burns, so must you. At some point, the fire stops being the most demanding presence in the room. It still burns, still asks for attention, but something quieter begins to press in around it. Expectation. The kind that does not announce itself loudly, but waits patiently, confident it will be met. There are no pages to consult here, no neat lists of instructions waiting to be followed. What you carry instead lives behind your eyes and in your hands, layered there by repetition and correction. You know what usually works, you know what failed once and was never forgiven. Between those two memories, you work. A pot simmers, its surface giving nothing away. You lean closer, inhaling, trying to read it. Smell matters more than sight now. Too sharp, and it needs time. Too flat, and it needs something added, though deciding what is its own quiet gamble. You hesitate for only a breath, then reach for salt, trusting instinct over caution. The crystals disappear into the liquid without comment. You stir slowly, counting without numbers. The spoon meets resistance that feels right, though you could not explain why. This is how decisions are made here, not through certainty, but through familiarity. You have done this before, or something close enough to it. That has to be enough. Tradition hovers over your shoulder, invisible but heavy. This is how it has always been done, you were told once, though no one explained who decided that or when. The phrase carries weight because it ends conversations. You repeat motions passed down without knowing their origin, adjusting only when necessity forces your hand. Sometimes you realize mid-task that you are unsure. The moment arrives quietly, slipping into your awareness like a draft through stone. You thought you knew how long something should cook. Now you're less certain. You glance at the fire, at the color of the coals, at the way the liquid moves. You wait. Waiting can be as dangerous as acting. Your chest tightens slightly. This is the silent panic you have learned to recognize and contain. It does not announce itself with racing breath or trembling hands. It settles in deeper, slowing you just enough to sharpen focus. You do not rush. Rushing invites mistakes, and mistakes linger. You think of past errors without meaning to. A sauce once too thin, remembered long after it was gone. A loaf baked unevenly, mentioned weeks later with a raised eyebrow. These memories surface uninvited, not to instruct, but to warn. Success fades quickly, failure stays. You taste carefully, using the smallest amount possible. The flavor unfolds slowly, revealing itself in layers. It is almost right. Almost is a dangerous word. You consider adding something else, then stop yourself. Change carries risk. Leaving it alone carries risk too. You weigh them quickly, choose the one that feels less visible. Another cook passes behind you, pauses, glances into the pot. They say nothing. Silence here can mean approval or restraint. You accept it either way and continue. The kitchen hums, but beneath the surface, tension threads through the work. Each dish is a decision made without safety net. There is no one to consult, no authority to defer to. Responsibility rests quietly in your hands, heavy but familiar. You move to another task, another pot, another uncertainty. This one smells different, less forgiving. You adjust the heat, nudging wood aside to temper the flame. The fire responds slowly, reluctantly. Time stretches as you wait for it to settle, knowing that too much heat will announce itself later in ways you cannot undo. You remember being taught this long ago, not with words, but with observation. You watched someone else work, noting when they stirred, when they waited, when they tasted. You learned which mistakes earned sharp looks, and which were quietly corrected. This is how knowledge travels here, unevenly and incompletely. Written recipes would feel like mercy. They would also feel like accusation. If a dish failed while following written instruction, blame might shift elsewhere. Here, failure belongs entirely to the person holding the spoon. Your hands feel steady, despite the thoughts circling beneath the surface. Muscle memory takes over when doubt grows too loud. You chop, stir, adjust, trusting the part of yourself shaped by years of repetition. This part rarely panics. It simply works. Still, awareness lingers. You know that what you send upward will be judged without context. No one will consider the condition of the ingredients, the behavior of the fire, the interruptions. The result will be tasted and a conclusion drawn. You wipe your hands on your apron, leaving new marks layered over old ones. The fabric tells its own story, though no one reads it. You lean slightly away from the hearth, letting cooler air brush your face, then return to your position. A dish is nearly ready. You watch it closely, waiting for the moment when waiting must end. It arrives subtly. You act without hesitation, removing it from heat, transferring it, finishing it with a practiced flourish that suggests confidence, whether or not you feel it. Confidence matters. It travels with the food, shaping expectation. A dish presented decisively is forgiven more easily than one offered with visible doubt. You understand this, even if those above never articulate it. As plates are assembled, you feel the tension ease slightly. Not because danger has passed, but because it has moved. Judgment now belongs elsewhere. You remain with what you can control. Another pot waits, another decision approaches. The cycle continues without pause. Guesswork becomes habit. Habit becomes tradition. Tradition resists change, even when change might help. You operate within this closed circle, adjusting only at its edges. The fire crackles softly, indifferent to your internal calculations. It burns what you give it, no more, no less. In that way, it feels almost kind. You breathe out slowly, shoulders lowering a fraction. The panic recedes, replaced by focus. There will be time to worry later, perhaps, or perhaps not at all. Worry does not improve flavour. You return to the work, guided by memory rather than instruction, aware that every choice leaves a trace, and in a place where mistakes are remembered far longer than successes, you learn to make peace with uncertainty, carrying it quietly, like everything else. By the time the larger preparations begin to gather shape, the kitchen feels fuller without gaining new space. Not crowded exactly, but weighted. Tables fill with dishes in various states of readiness, each one waiting for its moment to be transformed from labour into spectacle. The air grows richer, denser, carrying the promise of plenty, so convincingly that even you almost believe it. Almost. Torches are lit and brought closer, their flames steadier than the hearth's, and far more flattering. They soften edges, deepen colours, turn imperfections into shadows. You notice how different everything looks under this light. Meat glistens more generously. Bread appears fuller. Sauces shine as though they were made for admiration rather than concealment. The kitchen does not usually concern itself with beauty, but today beauty is required. You arrange platters carefully, adjusting placement so that fullness is emphasized. Portions are spread wide, leaves and herbs tucked into gaps. Bones turned so they suggest intention rather than necessity. It is a kind of storytelling, this arrangement, one that relies on suggestion rather than truth. The smells rise again, layered now with spices meant to dominate. Pepper bites sharply at the back of the nose. Cloves and cinnamon drift through the air, warming and confusing the senses. These are expensive scents, valued not just for flavour, but for their ability to distract. You use them generously, knowing their purpose well. Under the sauces, beneath the crusts, there are stories you do not tell. Meat that waited too long before meeting fire. Bread baked a little too dark to hide uneven texture. Fish that arrived already carrying the faint whisper of tide and time. None of it is dangerous enough to discard. None of it is good enough to stand alone. You ladle sauce with care, letting it pool and spread, smoothing surfaces until they look unified. The motion is almost gentle. Sauce forgives much. It binds, it coats, it convinces. You have seen it rescue more meals than skill ever could, as dishes leave the kitchen, carried upward toward torchlight and expectation. You watch them go without sentiment. They will be admired briefly, perhaps praised, perhaps criticised. Either way, they will be consumed, broken down into memory and rumour. Their origins will not matter. You turn back to the tables, where more waits. The abundance is convincing, even from here. Platters line up, heavy and full. Baskets overflow with bread. Bowls gleam with stewed fruits and honeyed nuts. It would look like generosity to anyone who did not know the effort behind it, or the compromises layered into every bite. You know how thin the margin truly is, how carefully everything has been stretched. One animal divided into many portions, one sack of grain extended just far enough. Waste disguised as richness, scarcity hidden beneath repetition. You adjust a garnish that has wilted slightly, replacing it with one that looks fresher in the torchlight. No one will eat it. It exists solely to suggest freshness, to reassure eyes before mouths have a chance to question. You are good at this now, at knowing what will be noticed and what will not. The heat in the kitchen competes with the warmth of the torches, creating pockets of thick air that cling to skin. Sweat gathers again, tracing paths it has travelled many times before. You ignore it, careful not to let it drip where it might be seen. Appearances matter more as the feast approaches. There is movement everywhere now, but it feels different than before. Purpose sharpens, voices grow quieter, more focused. Even the animals seem to retreat, sensing that this moment belongs to others. The kitchen becomes a staging ground rather than a workshop. You lift another platter, this one heavier, its contents arranged to suggest generosity rather than necessity. You feel the weight travel through your arms, settling into your shoulders. This weight is familiar, though it carries a different meaning now. It represents success if it reaches its destination intact, failure if it does not. As it leaves your hands, you watch the torchlight catch the surface of the food, transforming it. The illusion completes itself, somewhere between here and there. By the time it arrives, it will belong to a different world entirely. You remain behind, surrounded by what did not make it upward. Scraps, drippings, surfaces marked by hurried arrangement. The contrast is stark if you allow yourself to notice it. You choose not to linger on the thought. Instead, you tidy what can be tidied. A smear wiped away, a spill absorbed. Tools gathered and set aside. The kitchen sheds its temporary role as theatre and returns to something more honest. Still, the echo of the feast lingers. Laughter drifts faintly downward, filtered through stone and distance. The sound does not carry details, only suggestion. You cannot tell whether it is genuine. You do not need to. You think briefly about how abundance is measured, not by what exists, but by what is shown. The feast above will be remembered as lavish, regardless of how it was assembled. The work below will be forgotten, as it always is. Your hands feel sticky now, coated with sugar and fat, spices clinging stubbornly. You rinse them quickly, not to clean, but to reset. The water darkens immediately. You shake your hands dry and return to the hearth. The fire has been kept steady through all of this, tended even as attention shifted elsewhere. It burns patiently, unconcerned with spectacle. You adjust it slightly, restoring balance. The simple act feels grounding. As the last of the feast leaves the kitchen, a strange quiet settles. Not silence, but a thinning. The urgency dissipates, leaving behind a dull exhaustion that seeps into your bones. You lean briefly against a table, feeling its worn edge press into your palms. The illusion has been sent upward, complete and convincing. What remains here is truth in its quieter form. Heat, residue, fatigue. You straighten because there is still work to be done. There always is. The feast will end. Plates will return scraped and empty, carrying only traces of what once filled them. The memory of abundance will linger longer than the reality ever did. You stay where you are, surrounded by the aftermath, aware that beneath every display of plenty lies careful concealment. And you understand, perhaps more clearly than anyone else in the castle, how much effort it takes to make decay look like celebration. When the last platter leaves and does not return, the kitchen changes its posture. It does not relax exactly, but it lowers its shoulders, settling into a quieter state that feels heavier for the absence of noise. The hall above has emptied. Laughter, if there was any, has thinned and drifted away. What remains is the aftermath, waiting patiently where it always does. Smoke begins to settle again, no longer stirred by urgency or movement. It sinks back into the stones, as if reclaiming familiar ground. The ceiling darkens by degrees so small, they're almost polite. The fire still burns, but it has softened, embers glowing with a tired steadiness that mirrors your own. You stand for a moment without moving, letting the quiet arrive fully. It is not complete silence. It never is. There is the faint crackle of cooling wood, the slow drip of fat solidifying and falling where it will be scraped later, the distant scuttle of something small and unbothered by the day's events. Still, the absence of voices feels pronounced enough to notice. Then you begin. The pots come first because they are the loudest reminder of what has passed. They sit where they were set down hours ago, coated with layers that have already begun to harden. Sauce clings stubbornly to sides. Burnt residue grips the bottom of one with quiet determination. You lift it, feeling its weight tug at your arms, and carry it to where water waits. The water looks tired. It has already served many purposes today. You use it anyway. A cloth is dipped, wrung out, pressed against metal. The first pass loosens nothing. You scrub harder, muscles tightening, breath slowing. The sound is rhythmic and dull, filling the space left by voices. Scrape, pause, scrape again. You know better than to expect cleanliness. That is not the goal. What you seek is acceptability, a state in which the pot will not interfere with the next use. The blackened bottom will remain blackened. The metal will never shine again. But the worst of the residue can be persuaded to move. As you work, your reflection appears faintly in the curved surface, distorted and broken by scratches. You do not linger on it. The image shifts with each motion, unreliable and unimportant. More pots follow. Some are easier, some less willing. One bears the memory of something boiled too long, its smell returning faintly as water touches it. You grimace, then continue. Smells have a way of resurfacing here. You have learned not to trust their absence. The floor waits next. You pour water sparingly, watching it spread across stone, darkening it before sinking into cracks that have absorbed centuries of similar efforts. You scrub with a stiff brush, pushing grime along paths worn smooth by repetition. The water grows murky almost immediately, carrying traces of everything that has passed through the kitchen today. You guide it toward a low point where it will sit until someone decides it should be moved. Kneeling brings you closer to the stone, closer to the truth of the place. The floor is uneven, cold despite the day's heat, textured with grooves left by countless feet and tools. You feel it through your knees, a steady pressure that reminds you how long this has been done, and how little the surface has changed in response. You move slowly, methodically, covering the same ground more than once. The brush catches on something sticky, then releases. You do not ask what it is. The water carries it away without explanation. Around you, others work in similar quiet. Movements are efficient, unspoken agreements guiding who does what. Someone gathers scraps into a bucket, careful not to waste what can still serve another purpose. Someone else wipes down a table, pushing crumbs into a waiting cloth. The sounds overlap gently, never competing. The fire is tended one last time, reduced rather than fed. You bank the embers carefully, covering them so they will last through the night. The heat softens, retreating inward. The glow dims, though it does not disappear. It never truly does. As the fire settles, the air cools slightly. Sweat on your skin dries, leaving behind a faint itch. Your shoulders sag as the tension you have been holding loosens, without permission. Fatigue does not arrive suddenly. It seeps in, filling spaces left by urgency. You wipe down a table where bread was cut earlier, Flour has mixed with grease to form a paste that resists removal. You scrape gently, then more firmly, until the surface is merely dull rather than sticky. You run your hand over it once, testing. It will do. The walls, of course, remain unchanged. Smoke stains them too deeply for any cloth to reach. They absorb everything without complaint, holding on to it until it becomes part of them. You glance upward, following the dark patterns that creep higher each year. No one remembers when they first appeared. No one expects them to go away. Water is fetched again, because there is always one more thing. You lift the bucket with a grunt you do not bother to hide. The path to the well feels longer now, though it has not moved. Your steps echo faintly, each one measured, careful. You draw the water, pull it up, feel the strain in your arms. The water does not look any better than before. You accept it. Back in the kitchen, you rinse your hands thoroughly this time, scrubbing until your fingers ache. The water darkens immediately. You rinse again anyway. The sensation is grounding, even if it accomplishes little. You dry your hands on your apron, which has long since stopped pretending to be clean. As the cleaning continues, the kitchen grows quieter still. One by one, others finish their tasks and drift away. Footsteps soft, voices low. Each departure leaves more space behind, more silence to fill. Eventually it is just you and the room, and the faint life still stirring within it. You straighten a bench that does not need straightening. You adjust a tool that is already where it belongs. These small acts serve no practical purpose. They give your hands something to do, while your body catches up with the end of the day. The smoke has fully settled now, sinking back into stone, wood, fabric. It feels thicker without the heat and motion to stir it. You breathe it in, slow and familiar. This is the scent you will carry with you when you leave, clinging stubbornly to hair and skin. You look around once more, taking in what you have accomplished. The kitchen looks much as it did before the feast, perhaps a little more worn, a little more tired. The illusion of cleanliness holds just long enough to be convincing. By morning it will be undone. That knowledge does not trouble you. It is simply how things work here. You gather your things, such as they are, and make your way toward the door. The fire glows faintly behind you, embers resting, smoke settled. The kitchen stands quiet and patient, already waiting for the next demand. As you step away, the silence follows, heavy but not unkind. You have scrubbed what could be scrubbed. What remains belongs to the stones, to the smoke, to time itself. And in this place, that is as close to clean as anything ever gets. Once the surfaces have been scraped to their familiar dullness, and the last bucket has been set back in its place, the kitchen does not empty completely. It never does. Something remains behind when the noise fades and the work loosens its grip. A feeling, perhaps, or a habit. You linger without quite meaning to, aware that there are still things to be done that cannot be scrubbed away. This is when the small emotions begin. You notice them almost without thinking. A hand pauses near the hearth, fingers brushing the stone in a way that looks accidental but is not. Someone murmurs a few words under their breath while banking the embers, the sound too soft to distinguish as prayer or habit. A pinch of salt is scattered near the threshold, not enough to be noticed by anyone who does not already know it is there. You participate in these gestures as naturally as you stir a pot or lift a knife. They are woven into the rhythm of the place, inseparable from the work itself. You do not remember learning them. They were simply always part of how things were done. Before leaving the kitchen for the night, you touch a small charm tied to a beam near the ceiling. It is nothing impressive, a knotted cord, darkened with age, threaded through a ring of metal that might once have been part of something else. No one knows who put it there. No one removes it. You brush it lightly with your fingers, just enough to acknowledge its presence. It is meant to keep sickness away, or fire, or spoilage. The exact purpose shifts, depending on who you ask, but its importance remains constant. You would feel uneasy leaving without touching it, even if you could not say why. Near the bread table, someone has tucked a sprig of dried herb into a crack in the stone. It smells faintly bitter when disturbed. You leave it where it is. Bread has its own risks, its own failures, and every bit of luck is welcome. You have seen loaves fail for reasons no one could explain. Too dense, too sour, too quick to mould. It seems unwise to tempt such things. You move slowly through the space, attending to these quiet rituals as carefully as you did the cleaning. A candle stub is left near a corner, not lit, simply present. A saint's name is whispered when a pot cracked earlier than expected. The words are not spoken loudly enough to invite attention. They are offered the way one offers a nod to a stranger on a familiar road. You are not particularly devout, at least not in the way sermons describe devotion. But the kitchen has taught you its own theology, one built from experience rather than doctrine. You have seen how quickly food turns, how easily illness spreads, how fire can behave unpredictably if offended. You have learned that there are limits to skill and effort, and beyond those limits, hope takes on a practical form. You remember a time when someone laughed at these gestures. It was a brief thing, the laugh. It faded quickly after a week of bad luck, a string of spoiled dishes, a sickness that lingered longer than it should have. The laughter did not return. Superstition here is not mocked. It is respected as another tool like salt or flame, whose effects cannot always be measured but are widely trusted. You pause near the hearth again, checking that the embers are resting as they should. You make a small mark in the ash with the tip of a tool, a habit picked up long ago. No one ever explained what it was meant to do. You have never skipped it. The air feels different now, heavier in a way that is not entirely physical. Smoke lingers, but there is something else beneath it, a sense of waiting. The kitchen at night feels more aware of itself, its corners deeper, its shadows more deliberate. You understand why people once believed places like this had spirits of their own. As you gather your things, you murmur a few words meant for protection. They are not formal. They shift slightly each time, shaped by memory and convenience. You include the fire, the food, the people who will eat it tomorrow. You do not include yourself explicitly. That feels unnecessary, perhaps even presumptuous. Someone else finishes a similar ritual nearby, crossing themselves quickly before stepping toward the door. The gesture is small, efficient, done without pause. You do not comment. There is no need. Shared belief does not require discussion. You think of the illnesses you have seen pass through the kitchen. A cook who grew pale and weak, never quite recovering. A child who stopped coming after a fever. The causes were never fully understood. The kitchen absorbs these losses quietly, the way it absorbs everything else. Superstition grows strongest where explanation fails. A bowl is left inverted on a table, not because it needs to be, but because leaving it upright invites bad luck. You turn it without thinking, setting it down carefully. The gesture feels as important as locking a door, even if you could not explain the danger it avoids. As you prepare to leave, you glance once more at the space around you. By torchlight and fireglow, the kitchen looks almost peaceful. The tools rest, the surfaces wait, the air holds still. This is the moment when belief feels closest to certainty, when the rituals seem to matter most. You understand, on some level, that these gestures do not guarantee safety. People still fall ill, food still spoils, fires still escape their bounds. But you also understand that doing nothing feels worse. Action, even symbolic action, provides structure. It gives fear a shape small enough to be handled. You step toward the door, pausing just long enough to touch the stone beside it. The stone is cool now, the heat withdrawn. You press your palm there briefly, grounding yourself in something solid and older than any belief you carry. As you leave the kitchen behind, you carry the rituals with you. They cling as persistently as smoke, woven into habit and memory. You know you will repeat them tomorrow without question, just as you will grind grain and tend fire and wash tools in water that is never quite clean. Luck here is not a matter of chance. It is something cultivated carefully, gesture by gesture, prayer by prayer, in the quiet spaces where skill ends and hope begins. And in a place where so much depends on things beyond your control, you learn to hold on to every scrap of protection you can find, even if you are never entirely sure which ones are listening. You step away from the kitchen, with the rituals still clinging to you, following corridors that narrow as they move farther from heat and light. The stone underfoot cools quickly, drawing warmth from your souls with a patience that feels deliberate. The castle does not rush you. It never does. It knows where you belong. As you walk, the thought surfaces without invitation, as it often does at this hour, when the work has loosened its grip just enough to allow reflection. You consider what you are given here, not in the grand sense that nobles discuss, but in the practical way that shapes daily survival. There is food, not the food you prepare, not the dishes that leave the kitchen dressed in spice and ceremony, but food nonetheless. Bread that is slightly stale, porridge that has cooled too long, stew that did not quite make it upstairs. It is filling, dependable, and rarely refused by your body, no matter how little enthusiasm it inspires. There is shelter, thick stone walls that keep the worst of the cold at bay, even if they never truly warm. A place to sleep, shared and crowded, but dry enough most nights. A roof that does not leak unless the rains insist too hard. You have learned not to take these things lightly. Outside the castle, they are not guaranteed. Your position comes with these privileges, modest as they are. You do not pay rent in coin. You do not barter daily for your right to exist within these walls. Your labour answers those questions for you. As long as you work, you remain. The arrangement is simple, almost elegant in its bluntness. You think about coin briefly. Wages are mentioned often enough to sound important, but they arrive irregularly and in amounts that never linger. A few coins pressed into your hand now and then, enough to remind you that payment exists, not enough to change anything. Coin moves quickly here, slipping away to cover small needs, small debts, small comforts that do not last. More often, payment arrives in other forms. An extra portion, a blanket passed down when someone else no longer needs it, permission to sleep closer to warmth during winter's worst nights. These are not written into any agreement. They're granted or withheld quietly, according to usefulness and mood. You understand this economy well. It does not require explanation. As you move through the servants' quarters, you see the evidence of it everywhere. People who have been here longer carry themselves differently. Their movements are efficient, their expectations modest. They have learned where they stand and how not to fall. Leaving crosses your mind sometimes, not as a plan, but as a concept, a path that exists in theory. You imagine stepping beyond the gate, following the road until the castle's outline softens and disappears. You imagine fresh air that does not smell of smoke, work that does not begin and end with fire. The image fades quickly. Beyond the walls, food must be found rather than assigned. Shelter must be negotiated daily. Work must be sought, proven, defended. You have seen what happens to those who leave without something certain waiting for them. They return thinner, quieter, or not at all. Here, at least, the rhythm is known. You know when you will rise, when you will work, when you will eat. The predictability dulls the edges of fear. It replaces uncertainty with endurance. Your role carries a kind of invisible protection. You are useful. The kitchen cannot function without hands like yours. This knowledge is never spoken aloud, but it shapes how people treat you. You are not important, but you are necessary. In this place, that distinction matters. Privilege here is subtle and relative. You are closer to warmth than many. You handle food daily, even if you do not enjoy the best of it. You are indoors when storms press hard against the walls. These things accumulate, quietly convincing. You pass someone seated on a bench, counting coins slowly, lips moving as they subtract and rearrange. Their brow furrows with concentration. You do not stop. You already know the sum will not change much, no matter how long they stare at it. Position is not just about what you have, it is about what you cannot risk losing. If you were to leave, you would surrender the small certainties that structure your days. You would exchange known exhaustion for unknown hardship. You would give up the right to be tired in a familiar place. The thought settles heavily, not as regret, but as understanding. The castle feeds you just enough. It shelters you just enough. It keeps you busy enough that longing never fully forms. Desire requires space, and here, space is limited. You reach your sleeping place and sit down, joints protesting as they release the day's tension. The room smells faintly of smoke and damp wool, a diluted version of the kitchen's presence. Others are already settling in, moving quietly, conserving energy for the morning. You remove your shoes, feeling the stone's cold bite briefly before straw and cloth intervene. The mattress yields beneath you, familiar and unremarkable. It does not invite rest so much as permit it. As you lie back, you consider how rarely anyone speaks of ambition here. People speak of weather, of food, of aches that linger too long. They speak of who has favour and who does not. They do not speak of leaving as a real option. The idea exists, but it remains abstract, like a distant road that is always out of view. The castle has a way of narrowing possibilities without appearing to do so. It offers enough to make departure feel unnecessary, not enough to make staying feel generous. This balance holds people in place more effectively than locks ever could. Your body relaxes despite the thoughts circling quietly. Fatigue claims you with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow will arrive whether you welcome it or not, and the kitchen will be waiting, as it always is. You close your eyes, breathing in air that still carries traces of smoke. The smell has become a marker of safety as much as confinement. It tells you where you are and where you will remain. Here in this position, you are fed, sheltered, and claimed by routine. The castle does not ask for loyalty, it assumes it. And as long as your hands can work and your body can endure, leaving remains a distant notion, outweighed by the simple, persistent comfort of knowing exactly where you will wake. You begin to notice the seasons not by looking outside, but by how the kitchen treats your body. The castle rarely announces change in obvious ways. Its walls are too thick, its windows too narrow. What reaches you does, so indirectly, filtered through stone and smoke and habit. In winter, the cold arrives quietly, seeping upward from the floor and outward from the walls. It settles into your bones before you have time to resist it. The hearth works harder then, consuming wood at an impatient pace. But the warmth it gives is uneven. Your front bakes while your back chills. Your hands hover close to flame until the skin tightens and reddens. Then retreat, numbness creeping in almost immediately. Your breath becomes visible in the darker corners of the kitchen, faint clouds appearing and vanishing as you move. Water stings when it touches your skin, cold enough to make your fingers ache as you scrub and rinse. You work faster not because you must, but because stillness feels dangerous. Muscles stiffen quickly in winter, joints protesting if you pause too long. Outside, snow may fall. You hear about it secondhand, carried in on boots or mentioned in passing. The kitchen receives it only as dampness, melting into the stone and lingering as chill. You do not step out to see it. There is no need. The cold has already found you. In summer, the opposite problem arrives with equal persistence. Heat presses inward from every direction, no longer content to remain near the hearth. The air thickens until breathing feels like work. Sweat forms and refuses to evaporate, clinging to skin, soaking cloth. Your apron grows heavy, damp with effort, and never fully dries. The fire becomes an enemy then, though it cannot be dismissed. It must be fed, even when standing near it feels unbearable. You lean away instinctively, seeking cooler air that does not exist. The stone walls, so unyielding in winter, now radiate heat back at you, trapping warmth in the kitchen like a held breath. Flies appear, drawn by smells intensified by heat. They buzz lazily, landing where they should not, testing your patience. You wave them away with distracted motions, knowing they will return. Food turns more quickly in summer. You work with a sharper awareness then, senses alert to changes that signal spoilage. Fire works harder, seasoning heavier, vigilance constant. Despite all this, the work does not change. The same pots are lifted, the same grain is ground, the same bread rises and bakes, the same meat is cut, cooked, disguised, the same floors are scrubbed, the same water is fetched, the same fatigue settles into your muscles at the end of the day. Winter does not bring fewer meals, summer does not shorten the hours, hunger does not respect weather. Lords eat whether the air freezes or swelters, and the kitchen responds accordingly. You find yourself adapting without thinking about it. In winter, you layer clothing beneath your apron, sleeves pulled low, fingers stiff but steady. In summer, you strip down to the minimum allowed, skin slick, hair plastered to your forehead. These adjustments feel minor, insufficient, but they are all that is offered. The seasons mark time in subtle ways. In winter, the fire burns longer into the night, embers glowing stubbornly against the cold. In summer it is banked sooner, though the heat it leaves behind lingers just as long. Light changes too, though you rarely notice it directly. The kitchen's illumination comes from flame more often than sun. Your body keeps the better record. Scars itch differently in cold. Old burns ache more sharply when the air turns damp. In heat, exhaustion deepens faster, pressing down on your shoulders like a physical weight. You learn these patterns intimately, even if you never name them. You hear others talk about seasons as if they were separate worlds. Fields demand different labour. Roads become impassable or dusty. Crops flourish or fail. Here, those changes arrive only as variations in ingredient quality and temperature. Grain may be harder to come by. Vegetables may be fresher or more wilted. Meat may arrive frozen stiff or already too warm. You adjust without comment. There is a moment each year, brief and easy to miss, when the air feels balanced. Not too cold, not too hot. For a day or two, the kitchen feels almost comfortable. You notice it only because of how quickly it passes. Comfort has no place to linger here. The castle does not acknowledge seasons the way people do. It stands unchanged, absorbing heat and cold with equal indifference. Its routines continue uninterrupted, its demands steady. You realise, slowly, that this constancy is not accidental. The castle is built to endure, not to adapt. In winter, your hands crack and split despite careful wrapping. Flour finds its way into the cracks, stinging sharply. You flex your fingers, ignoring the pain. In summer, blisters form more easily, softened skin giving way under repeated pressure. You treat them quietly, then return to work. Sleep changes with the seasons too. In winter you curl tighter, seeking warmth, waking stiff and reluctant. In summer you lie restless, heat trapped beneath blankets, sweat cooling too slowly. Rest never feels sufficient. It never has. You find that your sense of time stretches differently, depending on the weather. Winter days feel longer, darkness pressing in early, the kitchen's glow standing in contrast. Summer days blur together, light lingering, heat dulling the edges of thought. But when you try to recall specifics, the differences fade. The work remains the clearest memory. At some point you stop expecting relief from change. The idea that seasons might bring improvement loses its appeal. You accept that discomfort simply changes shape, never disappearing. Cold and heat are variations on the same lesson. You stand near the hearth again, as you always do, adjusting your position instinctively. In winter, you lean closer. In summer, you lean away. The motion feels automatic, unconscious. Your body has learned what to do, even if it never feels quite right. The fire burns steadily, unconcerned with weather. It consumes fuel at the same rate, demands the same attention. In this, it feels honest. It does not pretend that conditions matter. It asks only for presence. As the seasons turn outside, unnoticed by you most days, the kitchen continues to exist in its own cycle. Meals come and go. Fires are fed and banked. Smoke settles and lifts. Your hands repeat their motions, adapting just enough to endure. You come to understand that change here is superficial. Cold creeps in, heat presses down. Neither alters the fundamental truth of the work. You are bound to the hearth, regardless of season, measuring your year not in months or weather, but in endurance. And in that realization, something settles. The hope that things might become easier fades quietly, replaced by a steadier expectation. Winter and summer pass through the kitchen like visitors who never stay long enough to matter. The smoke remains, the work remains, and so do you. There are moments when nothing asks for you all at once. They do not arrive announced, and they do not stay long, but you learn to recognize them by the way your shoulders lower before you realize why. The kitchen does not fall silent exactly. It simply loosens its grip. You notice it first in the bread. A loaf has been set aside, just out of the oven's reach, resting on a wooden board that has already cooled. As the heat leaves it, the crust tightens and releases in small, gentle sounds. A faint crackle, a whisper of settling. It is easy to miss if you are moving too quickly. You pause long enough to hear it, and the sound feels like a reward you did not earn, but are grateful to receive. The smell is warm and steady, uncomplicated by spice or concealment. For a moment, it suggests nourishment without judgment. You do not touch the loaf. Touching would make it part of the work again. Instead, you let it exist on its own, cooling, finishing what the fire began. The hearth is behaving itself. Flames rise and fall evenly. No sudden demands for attention. The wood burns cleanly, embers glowing with a patience that mirrors your own. You stand near it, not because you must, but because it is pleasant to do so when it asks nothing in return. Your hands rest at your sides, fingers flexing slowly. The ache is still there, but it has softened, dulled into something manageable. You breathe more deeply than you have in hours, drawing in air that feels almost light by comparison. Smoke still lingers, but it does not sting as sharply now. Someone passes behind you and pauses. They do not speak at first, then quietly they set a small cup on the edge of the table near you. It holds something warm, thin broth perhaps, or watered wine. You do not ask, you nod once in acknowledgement, a gesture exchanged without ceremony. This is kindness here. Not words, not gestures meant to be remembered, but practical offerings delivered without drawing attention. You lift the cup and drink slowly. The warmth spreads outward, reaching places the fire does not. You savour it without hurry, because hurrying would miss the point. Nearby, another cook hums softly, barely audible beneath the kitchen's usual sounds. The tune is unfamiliar, or perhaps it has simply been forgotten and reshaped over time. No one joins in, no one asks them to stop. The sound drifts for a while, then fades on its own. These pauses do not interrupt the work. They exist alongside it, woven into the same fabric. You learn to hold them carefully, knowing they are fragile. A pot will soon need stirring, a knife will soon need lifting, but for now, the rhythm slackens just enough to breathe. You lean against the table, feeling its worn edge beneath your palms. The wood is smooth where countless hands have rested in the same way. You are not the first to stand here, grateful for a moment that does not ask much of you. You will not be the last. The firelight flickers gently, painting the walls in slow motion. Shadows stretch and shrink, unhurried. In this light, the kitchen looks almost peaceful, its scars softened by glow and stillness. You know better than to trust appearances, but you allow yourself to appreciate them anyway. Your thoughts wander briefly, not far, just enough to remember that you are tired and that this tiredness is shared. You catch someone's eye across the room. They look back and smile faintly, a quick expression that carries understanding rather than cheer. It is enough. The loaf cracks again as it cools, a quiet punctuation in the air. You imagine what it will sound like when it is broken later, how the crust will resist before yielding. You imagine it without hunger, without urgency, just the sound itself, the texture. The imagining is strangely satisfying. A breeze slips through somewhere, stirring the smoke just enough to shift it away from your face. You close your eyes briefly, letting the air pass over you. When you open them again, the kitchen is unchanged, but you feel steadier within it. These moments teach you what to value, not ease, which rarely appears, not comfort, which is fleeting, but steadiness, predictability, small kindnesses that do not announce themselves loudly enough to be taken away. You take another sip from the cup, then set it aside. The warmth remains even after the vessel leaves your hands. You stretch your shoulders slowly, carefully, listening to the faint clicks and releases beneath skin and cloth. Your body responds, grateful for attention. Someone clears their throat softly, a signal that the pause is thinning. You straighten instinctively, readying yourself without resentment. The work will resume, that is not in question. Before it does, you allow yourself one more quiet observation. The fire continues to burn without needing you. The bread continues to cool without interference. The kitchen, for this brief interval, sustains itself. You step back into motion smoothly, lifting a tool, checking a pot, rejoining the flow without disruption. The moment closes behind you without ceremony, leaving no trace except a subtle easing you carry forward. These are the mercies that make endurance possible. Not rest exactly, but reminders that effort is occasionally met with gentleness. You do not expect them. You accept them when they appear. As the kitchen's rhythm tightens again, you hold on to the memory of crackling bread, shared warmth, and fire that asked nothing. They settle into you quietly, joining the countless small reasons you continue to stand where you are, ready for what comes next. The hour drifts past midnight without announcement. No bell marks it, no voice names it. The kitchen simply exhales, and you move with it, slow and deliberate, carrying the day's weight as carefully as you carried hot pots earlier. The fire has been reduced to embers now, their glow low and steady, pulsing softly like something alive but resting. You stand near the hearth one last time, not because anything needs doing, but because leaving feels abrupt. The embers hold warmth without urgency, light without demand. They glow patiently, confident that they will be needed again soon enough. You recognize the feeling. The air is cooler now, though the stone still radiates heat gathered over many hours. Smoke lingers in a thinner form, drifting lazily rather than pressing down. It settles back into cracks and beams, reclaiming the space the way it always does when movement fades. The kitchen feels larger in this quiet, its corners deeper, its surfaces less insistent. You move through the room with small final gestures. A tool nudged into alignment, a cloth folded and set aside. Not because anyone will notice, but because these actions close the day in a way that feels correct. Order here is never permanent, but intention matters. Your body registers the end before your mind does. The ache in your shoulders deepens, no longer held back by purpose. Your legs feel heavy, as though the stone floor has been slowly pulling at them all day and is reluctant to let go. Your hands throb faintly, fingers stiff, nails rimmed with traces of work that will not come clean no matter how much water you offer them. You wash once more, briefly. The water is cool, the sensation sharp enough to clear lingering fog from your thoughts. You do not linger. The water darkens almost immediately, carrying away little more than surface traces. You accept that and dry your hands on your apron, which absorbs moisture without complaint. As you step away from the hearth, the embers respond with a faint shift, settling deeper into themselves. They do not flare. They do not fade. They simply remain. You glance back once, committing the sight to memory without knowing why. Perhaps because it is reassuring. Perhaps because it feels like goodbye, even though you know it is not. The corridor beyond the kitchen greets you with cooler air and deeper shadow. Your footsteps sound louder here, echoing softly against stone. Each step carries you farther from heat, closer to rest. The castle around you is quieter now, its daytime presence withdrawn into stillness. Doors are closed, hallways empty. Even the drafts seem gentler, less restless. You walk slowly, allowing fatigue to stretch out to yours rather than resisting it. There is no need to hurry. Morning will come regardless of how quickly you reach your bed. The path is familiar, traced so many times that your feet know it better than your thoughts do. In the sleeping quarters, the air smells faintly of damp wool and smoke, a diluted echo of the kitchen's presence. Others are already asleep, bodies curled inward, breath slow and uneven. You move carefully, not out of courtesy so much as habit. Quiet here feels fragile, something to be preserved. You ease yourself down onto the straw mattress, feeling it compress beneath your weight. The straw shifts and sighs softly, settling into a shape that matches you. It is not comfortable in the way comfort is described elsewhere, but it is familiar, and familiarity counts for something. As you lie back, the day's sounds replay faintly in your mind. The crackle of fire, the scrape of stone, the muted clatter of tools. They blur together, losing sharpness, becoming something closer to memory than experience. Your breathing slows, matching the stillness around you. Your muscles relax reluctantly, releasing tension in stages. A shoulder drops, a hand unclenches, your jaw loosens. Each small surrender feels earned. Pain remains, but it has softened, dulled into something that can be carried without thought. You stare into the darkness, aware of the castle's presence around you. Thick walls, high towers, endless stone. It has stood through countless nights like this one, sheltering people who rise before dawn and sleep too little. It will continue to do so long after you are gone. The thought does not trouble you. There is comfort in its scale, in the way your individual exhaustion becomes insignificant against its endurance. You are one of many, and that knowledge is oddly reassuring. Somewhere nearby, a rat moves within the walls, its tiny sounds barely perceptible. You do not tense at the noise. It is as much a part of this place as you are. The castle belongs to all who endure its rhythms. As sleep approaches, thoughts surface without urgency. Not worries exactly, just acknowledgements. That tomorrow will resemble today in ways both obvious and subtle. That the fire will be waiting, banked but alive. That hunger will arrive on schedule, indifferent to your fatigue. You consider briefly how early you will wake. Not by choice, but by habit, by smell, by the sense that the kitchen has begun to stir even before it does. You know that when you open your eyes, the embers will still be there, or their descendants will be. Fire does not forget its purpose. The inevitability of it all settles over you like a blanket. It does not feel oppressive. It feels dependable. The predictability that once seemed limiting now offers structure, something solid to rest against. Your breathing deepens further, the rhythm steady and unremarkable. The day's images soften, edges blurring, colours fading into shadow. The kitchen recedes from the forefront of your mind, though it never leaves entirely. It hums quietly in the background, a presence you carry even into sleep. Just before you drift off, you imagine the embers glowing softly, untouched by time, waiting. The image brings a strange sense of calm. The work will return, yes. The demands will resume, but for now, there is this pause, this brief suspension where nothing is required of you. You allow yourself to sink into it. Sleep arrives gently, unremarkable in its coming, wrapping around you without ceremony. The castle holds steady around you. The fire rests, and though morning will come too soon, there is comfort in knowing exactly what it will bring. The kitchen will wake before you do, and somehow that thought feels like home. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.